The first act of thriller trailers is mainly used to introduce the characters, the setting, and the narrative. In the first act of our trailer, we introduce the three main characters during their childhood, as it is the events that occurred when they were children that led to the major problems in the future. Through the clothing and props used, alongside the setting of the scenes in the first act, the everyday nature of our trailer was expressed, which created a sense of realism, which is important as realism is a very typical convention of thrillers. The second act of thriller trailers usually consists of beginning to introduce the problem. In the second act of our trailer, we began giving an insight on the problem slowly emerging. For example, the main character joining the same class as the two boys, or her sending anonymous threats to them, to begin creating suspense amongst the audience. Lastly, the third act of thriller trailers consists of intensifying the major problem to create tension amongst the audience. In our third act, we did a sequence of intense montage scenes which show multiple different situations where Jessica is tormenting the boys to further create tension and to draw the audience's attention without giving away too much information and spoiling the film. The two main themes of our trailer is revenge and psychological trauma. We wanted psychological trauma to be one of our main themes as we wanted to challenge the audience's mind to see what they would do if they were put in the same situation as our protagonists, alongside seeing whether or not they can justify all the anger and revenge. We expressed the theme of psychological trauma through the narrative, mainly stemming from the protagonist's childhood where she was intensely bullied and isolated, which could be said to have caused her to become psychologically traumatized, which drove her to get her revenge. We also wanted revenge to be one of our main themes as we thought it would allow us to create tension and suspense amongst the audience through the torment while creating a sense of realism, as the revenge could be somewhat justified through the protagonist's unpleasant childhood. Including realism within our trailer was very important to us as it is a typical convention in thrillers, and so by including it to our thriller, it helped our trailer have more of a thriller feel to it. Typically, the settings within a thriller are quite similar as most of them are set within a house, a building, or an everyday environment to create realism. In our trailer, our two most used settings were the school, the house, alongside the area surrounding the house. We chose the school as one of our two main settings for two reasons. One being that our characters are teenagers, and so we wanted to ensure that the setting corresponds and links effectively to our characters and the general plot of the thriller. The second reason being that the school would be a nice way to include a sense of irony whilst introducing the problem, as it was the school where the protagonist was mainly bullied as a child, and years later it's the school where she begins her torment by joining the same class as the boys, so she's able to easily observe them. We also wanted the house and the area surrounding it to be another key location within our trailer that would allow us to get nicer angles and shot types of certain scenes where we wanted to create more suspense. For example, the scene where Jessica is in the house looking at the boys out the window through an over-the-shoulder shot while she sends them an anonymous text. Alongside the fact that houses are typically one of the main locations within a thriller film, so we wanted to ensure that we follow that. In addition, we wanted to include these two locations within our trailer as it again expressed the everyday nature of our thriller, which created realism throughout it. In terms of costumes within our trailer, we wanted to make sure that the clothing our characters wore were very casual and weren't too over-the-top or eye-catching. This is because we wanted to make the setting and the narrative to have an everyday feel to it so that the audience can relate and connect with it to an extent whilst creating realism, alongside making sure that the audience's main focus would be on the events occurring and the characters' dialogue rather than having their attention be misplaced. Majority of the props we used were quite basic, such as a phone or photo frame, to help tie the narrative together much better by allowing characters to express their actions more effectively. For example, when Jessica used her phone to send the boys an anonymous text threatening them. However, we did include a hammer a few times in the trailer as we wanted a specific prop to be very eye-catching whilst Jessica is executing her plan of revenge and torment against the boys to further create tension amongst the audience while expressing the trailer's dark narrative. Even though our trailer had three main characters, the central protagonist was Jessica. We wanted to emphasize her importance within the trailer in a way which created a lot of tension and suspense, but without placing too much attention on only her for the scenes to become repetitive or boring. We accomplished this through cinematography and the framing of the shots. For example, all the shots of the main protagonist are either close-up shots or medium shots, alongside giving her the most screen time, which emphasized the importance of her character within the narrative as a lot of focus and attention was drawn to her. In addition, in terms of dialogue, we didn't give the central protagonist a lot of dialogue as it created suspense and tension, as it made her character seem stranger and more suspenseful compared to the other characters, which further emphasized her importance. In addition, we used mise-en-scène to further emphasize the central protagonist's importance. We accomplished this as we used darker clothing, alongside a hoodie for a lot of her scenes, which made her stand out compared to the other characters, whilst making her seem more dangerous and suspenseful because of the stereotype that teenagers who wear hoodies with their hood up are dangerous. The type of shots used in trailers vary from the first act to the last act. In the first act of our trailer, we mainly used medium shots and close-up shots of the main characters and the key locations as we were introducing the main characters, the setting, and the narrative, while still expressing the significance within the narrative immediately as we emphasized the relationship between the main characters as it foreshadows what's to come in the future. Leading up to the third act, we continued mainly using close-up shots as we wanted to continue emphasizing the main characters alongside intensifying the major problem. However, in the final act, we did include a few long shots and over-the-shoulder shots because we wanted to show the intensity of the problem and how vulnerable the boys may be, as a long shot would make them appear quite small against a large background, whilst making the main protagonist appear larger and more powerful. The purpose of including titles in a trailer is to further engage the audience. We attempted this by including short phrases between certain scenes to emphasize what's to come next and intensify the narrative as the trailer goes on. For example, towards the end of the trailer, we included a short phrase saying, "How far will she go?" which intensified the previous and upcoming montage scenes. The correct placing of the film's actual title is also important to engage the audience. For our trailer, we decided to place the title of the film at the end of the trailer. This is because by placing the title after the fast-paced montage scenes, it will generate a lot more excitement amongst the audience, in addition to making it less likely for the audience to perhaps forget the title, which would be more likely to happen if the title was placed at the beginning of the trailer. Lastly, as most other trailers do, we included a short credit scene after the title, which included the producer, the cast, the director, and much more. We wanted to include a short credit scene at the end of the trailer as we wanted our trailer to follow typical trailer conventions alongside making it look much more professional, which would attract more people to go watch the film as it would give the impression that the film was of good quality.